Hey there, my name is Rob Knight, and I am pretty excited to share this lens with you. I have been waiting for the Olympus 150 to 400 millimeter f4.5 Pro lens to come for a while now. That's the big super telephoto that has the built-in teleconverter, and it's coming out sometime in 2020, sometime this winter, from what I understand. And recently I was told that Olympus was developing a 100 to 400 millimeter lens that's not quite the pro quality that this new 150 to 400 is going to be. And I'll be honest with you, I wasn't super excited about it. I actually, as some of you may know, I used Panasonic Lumix equipment for a long time for the Micro Four Thirds gear. And the only real super telephoto lens available in that system is the Lumix Leica 100 to 400. And it's an f4 to 6.3 variable aperture. And I have some great shots that I've made with that lens for sure. In fact, I looked the other day in my Lightroom catalog and I'd made over 20,000 images with that lens. But I always felt like I had to struggle to get great results with that lens. It was more often than not that I'm looking for the shot that's sharp, right? I might take 10 images or 15 images of the same animal, for example, and I would be struggling sometimes to find even one or two shots that were tack sharp in focus with that lens. And I'm not sure, why, but I know that when I first tried the Olympus EM1X and the EM1 Mark II with the 300 millimeter f4 Pro and the 40 to 150 f2.8, even with the teleconverters, now I have more keepers than I know what to do with. I have not found that same issue where I feel like I'm struggling just to find a sharp shot. Now I have so many sharp pictures that I can look through. If I take 10 shots of the same bird at the, in a similar time frame, I can find the one when the bird is exactly in the position that I like, or he's facing a particular way, so I get a catch light in the eyes. So that is a huge benefit for me, and it's one of the main reasons that I switched systems and began shooting Olympus cameras last year. So when the 100 to 400 was announced as not a pro lens, I figured it would be about the same as the Panasonic. That's what I assumed. It's variable aperture. It's actually f5 to f6.3, and I'm not too worried about that f6.3. That doesn't really bother me. And I'm also not worried about the wide end. Yes, the Panasonic starts at f4, but it works pretty quickly up to f5, f5.6. Again, I'm looking in my Lightroom catalog with that lens, just as a matter of research, I made very few shots with that lens at 100 millimeters. Most of the pictures that I made with that lens, that 100 to 400, are in the longer end of the range. And so the fact that it goes to f4 at the wide end instead of f5 on this particular lens was not a big deal to me. But anyway, they let me try the lens. My buddies at Olympus said, hey, we want you to try this lens out, see what you think, because they know that a lot of what I shoot is with a lens like this. And in the hand, it feels very similar to it's a similar size to the Lumix lens, the 100 to 400. It's image stabilized. It focuses really close. I don't remember how close the Lumix focuses, but I'm 6 feet 3 inches tall, and I can shoot this like a macro lens at things at my feet. So the focus distance, minimum focus distance, is inside of 4 or 5 feet. So I like that about it. I like the way that the lens collar turns. Just as a kind of a nerdy fact, I shoot a lot of vertical shots. So if I put the tripod collar on the top of the lens here, it still gets in my way. So I tend to leave the tripod collar here at about 2 o'clock, if you can see that. That way it's not in my fingers this way or with the vertical either, but that's just a little tip about the way I shoot. But one thing that stood out immediately is this lock switch, which I really like. It has a lock switch on the barrel so you can keep the lens from extending while you're carrying it. The lens is obviously going to hang down as you're carrying it, so this lock switch will keep the lens from extending while you're carrying the lens. So I like that. Just to show you how big it gets, this is at the 100mm setting, and this is at 400. So it does trombone a little bit. You know, it's a variable aperture lens. That's what's going to happen. It's not a big deal. It comes with a nice lens shade that is reversible. So this is the full size using it. It balances wonderfully on the EM1X. And I've used it on the EM1 Mark III, and I like it on there, but man, if I'm shooting the telephoto lenses, I'm using the 1X. That's the whole reason I have this camera. It balances so well with the bigger lenses. So I expected when I made some shots with this lens, I expected the quality to be similar to the Lumix, the Lumix and Leica 100 to 400. Same focal length range, same f6.3 at the long end. But I was pleasantly surprised to find the same problem that I have with other Olympus telephoto lenses. That problem is that I have too many shots that are sharp, so it's hard for me to pick my favorite. I have too many. If I take 10 shots, then 9 or 10 of them are in sharp focus. Love that. That's really great. And so I think this is a weather sealed lens too, by the way. I'm sure you can read all the specs. I'm not going to go over the unboxing and stuff like that. But I got so used to using the 300mm f4 Pro that I'd forgotten how nice it is to have a zoom telephoto lens. And I got a chance to go to a place out east of Atlanta recently and actually photograph Asian water buffalo, which I was expecting to be able to use this, you know, quarantine times. I figured I would shoot some birds in my yard, but I actually had a chance to go shoot this herd of Asian water buffalo. And the buffalo were across the field, and as they were coming towards me, I was able to shoot them, you know, at a distance, but then they got closer and closer, and well, now I can zoom out. And I don't have to change a lens. I don't have to switch to the 40 to 150. I don't have to have two cameras with two lenses. This focal length covered it all. And so even there in the moment, I was thinking, wow, this is really great. And it made me really excited for the 150 to 400 f4.5 Pro lens that's coming out. But I tell you, when I got home and I looked at these shots, looked at them in Lightroom at 100%, I was blown away by how sharp this lens is. I'm not sure why I'm surprised every time I get an Olympus lens and it's really sharp, because I don't have one yet that isn't really sharp. In my experience, it's much sharper than the Lumix version. Now, you know, that's obviously using the Lumix lens on the G9 camera. So I don't know if it's the combination of the EM1X with the 100 to 400 f5 to 6.3. I don't know if it's that combination that's sharper in general, but I would imagine just optically, for my money, this thing is much sharper than the Lumix version. And so there's one other thing that I wanted to talk about, just with my experience with this lens and comparing it to the Panasonic lens. Now, when you put the 1.4 teleconverter on this 100 to 400, hang on, I have my math here so that I can remember. If you put the 1.4 converter on it, it's a 280 to 1,120 millimeter field of view at f9. Okay, so that's with the 1.4 converter. Now, when you put the 1.4 converter on the Lumix lens, oh, you can't. It doesn't. The Lumix version does not take teleconverters, so it's a 100 to 400 period, out the door, no question. I again was pleasantly surprised by the quality with the 1.4 converter, and what I was thinking is that now you have 1,120 millimeters with this lens and the teleconverter at f9. Versus if I'm using my trusty 300 millimeter f4 Pro with the 2x converter, the TC20 teleconverter, which I often do, then I get 1,200 millimeters at f8. So with the 100 to 400 and the 1.4 converter, I'm getting just a little bit less reach out of the long end. I'm only a third of a stop slower, f9 versus f8 on the 300 millimeter Pro. And I've got the versatility of that zoom lens. So that struck me as a pretty great value to buy this lens with the 1.4 converter, and you've got a really nice, lightweight, weather sealed setup for wildlife photography. You've got over 1,000 millimeter field of view at f9, which is great. Again, you can use the 300 millimeter f4 Pro with the 2x converter and get this much more reach and a third of a stop less light. But man, for I don't want to say necessarily on a budget, but this is a really cost-effective way to get a really nice setup for wildlife photography. Now, I did use the 2x teleconverter on the 100 to 400, and it works beautifully. With the 2x, it's a 400 to 1600 millimeter field of view, which I can't say that without laughing, because that's crazy, 1600 millimeter field of view. But you can only open up to f13. That's all you get. Now, at f13 on a micro four thirds camera, you're getting into diffraction artifacts. The camera focused perfectly fine. The lens focused fine with the 2x converter. If you really need the reach and you've got lots of light, you can make pictures, and you can sharpen the image in post for sure. But in my experience, it's just not going to be as tack sharp as shooting something even at f8, f9. You're not getting as much artifact from diffraction as you would at f13, but f13 is kind of pushing the limits of that. So I want to show you, just in comparison, the 100 to 400 here versus the 300 millimeter f4 Pro. So again, this is the 300 f4 Pro, and this is the 100 to 400 f5 to 6.3. So it's much shorter, and this is without the shade extended on the 300. So it is shorter, a little bit easier to transport. You could even put the 1.4 teleconverter on the 100 to 400, and it's still not going to be as long as the 300 by itself. It is going to be longer than the 40 to 150. That's the 40 to 150 2.8. So, you know, it fits right in there, kind of where you think it would. It's not particularly huge for what it is. If I'm not mistaken, it's a little bit bigger than the Lumix Leica 100 to 400, but the fact that it's sharper takes it. I'm not worried about you know, a few centimeters here and there or a few ounces of weight. It does feel nice on any of the Olympus cameras that I've used it on. And what else? The image stabilization doesn't seem quite as tight as it does on the 300 f4 Pro. In other words, I've shot the 300 f4 with the 2x converter at literally a tenth of a second and slower, and gotten tack sharp shots. And I just don't feel, when you're looking through the viewfinder, I don't feel that confidence where when I tap the shutter release to activate the image stabilizer, it doesn't lock it down quite as solid. From what I understand, the lens handles 1 or 2 axes of stabilization, and the sensor in the body handles the other 2 or 3 axes of stabilization. I am, again, not a scientist. I'm a photographer. That's just what I was told. But it doesn't seem quite as good. Again, it's better than anybody else's IS in my experience. All in all, I was pleasantly surprised with this lens. It was easy for me to make great shots with it. And from what is considered not an entry-level lens by any means, but it's not considered a pro lens. But to be this sharp, to have weather sealing or splash resistance, I believe it says specifically, little touches like the lock function, the fact that it's compatible with the teleconverters, I think this is an incredible lens, and I'm really pleased that I got a chance to try it out. So I'm afraid now I'm going to have to get one of these. But the good thing about this, again, once I started doing the math with the 1.4 converter, there's lots of times that I might carry this instead of the 300 f4 Pro and a 2x converter, because you've got the flexibility of being able to zoom out. Again, I'd forgotten how much that adds to your experience sometimes when you're looking for that shot and you're looking down the barrel of a 1200 millimeter field of view. It's hard to find your subject sometimes. So the fact that you can zoom out, find your subject, and then zoom into it and have basically the same field of view with this and a teleconverter makes it kind of a no-brainer. It's a really nice lens. So let me know what you think of it. Is this something that's going to interest you? This makes me really excited for the 150 to 400 Pro lens. That's going to cost, I would imagine, considerably more than this lens. I believe this is around $1,500 at launch. And for what you get here, it's a really good value. And you could spend that money and get a teleconverter and spend less than $2,000 and have an amazing wildlife setup. So are you going to get something like this? Are you going to save up your money and get the big Pro version when it comes out this winter? I'm really curious because I think this is a really exciting lens. And from my experience, it blows away the competition. So let me know what you're going to do. Are you going to get this big guy? Or are you going to stick to your 300 f4 Pro for your bird, your wildlife photography, your sports? This would be an amazing lens for sports if you're shooting. Remember sports? They used to have sports, and people would get on fields and they'd throw balls and stuff. That was fun. But I digress, and I'll catch you next time. And I hope you enjoy the pictures of the Georgia Safari Conservation Park. And be sure and check them out online. I'm going to put the link in the comments, and that group is going to be. They're doing amazing things right outside of Atlanta, and they're just getting started. And I'm really pleased to be a part of that as well. So I'll see you next time. Bye.